What happens when one of the best-known pilot supply firms in the UK invites a few friends to an airfield? Over the next few minutes, Dan and I will give you a whole load of very useful answers. Welcome to the Pooley's Air Day 2009. If this is the first time you're hearing about this event, then, well, you missed it. Where were you? It took place last weekend, and despite the threat of the weather, it was once again a massive success. We could have just walked around aircraft describing them, but we figured if there were so many experienced pilots at the event and so much variety, why don't we bring you something more, something really useful? So over the next few minutes, thanks to the backing of Pooley's themselves, we're going to bring you some fun, some very useful advice, and some very interesting aircraft.
No consequence, but I won't.
The Pooley's Air Day 2009 may have only been billed as a fly-in, but not many fly-ins start with Soviet-made aircraft belting through the sky.
Right here, the place I've always feared. Yeah. So breathe in, let it go. Don't think so much anymore.
The Russians may have brought us a laughing stock that was a larder car, potatoes, extreme moustaches, but they shot us up their aircraft. The Yak-50 and the 52, which are used by the Yakovlevs team, were built back in the 70s, but are still the weapon of choice for many teams and private aerobatic junkies around the world. They'll take 9G, which means on the tightest turn, a Rick would weigh 1,800 pounds or 800 kilograms, and they are capable of climbing at a staggering 3,000 feet per minute.
How it ends, you never know. So breathe in, let it go.
Jez, the lead pilot, has some great advice on getting into and staying and flying in a moment.
If you're one of those pilots who flies from his private strip, then you're missing out, because flying's a great places to see a huge variety of aircraft that you might want to buy or fly. But let's be honest, there are also some very odd and rather unique looking aircraft which turn up to events like this, and some of them are just not that, well, pretty, which got us thinking, which aircraft did we like so much that we give up a kidney to fly them, but we still think look, well, ugly? Vicki went looking for hers first.
Now, I normally like my planes sleek, modern and very shiny, so for me this isn't the prettiest aircraft. However, I most certainly would want to fly in it. Not only is it a Piper, so you've got that really reliable brand, but this is actually an original training plane from 1953. There's only about 3 left in the UK and about 10 in Europe. So it's excellent. You will cruise nicely at 90 knots. It's just brilliant, and over half of the training aircraft in the world are Pipers, so you know what you're getting. It's a reliable aircraft and it is great to fly, very forgiving, so may not be the prettiest, but I most certainly would want to get up and fly in it.
And not surprisingly, Vicki, as always, has been invited to go for a flight. More kidney-selling aircraft in a moment.
Vicki also managed to thumb a lift in a motor glider at the Air Day, and we'll have a report for you in the next couple of weeks. But if you don't know what a motor glider is, I found a man who could explain all about his.
Yes, the aircraft is a Shimango motor glider, 2000S, and it's actually originally designed by Fournier, and originally made in France by Fournier, but now made in Brazil, and it's called a Shimango, or an AM2-200. It tours well. It's got a good touring speed of 95 knots, and it'll fly engine off at 31:1 glide ratio.
Fantastic. Now, the rarity of one of these motor gliders is a retractable undercarriage.
That's right.
And how did you come about choosing that one rather than a regular aircraft with a fixed undercarriage?
Well, there are probably about 3 or 4 designs available in the UK. This is one of the later designs. that's now available on the market. And of course, with a retractable undercarriage, you get that bit more performance. It's one of the reasons, principal reason why, is to have the performance.
Fantastic.
Gets two people side by side quite easily, and there's a good luggage space at the back for 12 kilograms. So, yeah, two guys of your size could get in there quite comfortably, and it's quite a low seating position, so it's very similar to a real gliding aircraft.
Well, a lot of people like myself who fly normal aircraft get a bit unhappy about the thought of turning the engine off, but when you do, you have to do certain adjustments to the propeller, and that's what's called feathering.
That's right. The beauty of it is if you just turned it off and you left it unfeathered the way it is, the engine will try to rotate, or the drag on the propeller. So this has a feathering device, as you can see, that the propeller is then fully feathered. This resists the motor turning and of course reduces the drag on the propeller.
What was with that hat, Alan? By the way, did you catch your registration?
So back to the question of an aircraft you desperately want to fly, but it's just not that pretty. It was my turn next. The Dove. Think about caravans or perhaps RVs in America, but really, really old ones. And when I look at the Dove, I think of one of those straight away. And I want to show you why. Because if you walk around here, yeah, okay, it's interesting. It's got that cockpit up there, which sticks out the top. But you know, one of the things with caravans is that you always get those sort of really manky old 1970s curtains, don't you? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? And that condensation on the inside. And when you walk up to this, what do we find almost straight away? We find condensation and manky 1970s curtains. Now, all the Doves I've seen always seem to look like this. But the other thing about this piece we're doing is ugly, but I'd still like to fly. And I've got to be honest, yes, I would. And not because it's any good, because I've got a pilot friend that actually flies these things, and apparently they're really quite cumbersome. They're not very exciting to fly, but they're different. You've got the twin engines on there. It's a big lump. And there's something just appealing. It's a bit like sort of talking about a Hercules or a C-130. You know, there's just something about it, that big lump, that experience of flying something which is a bit heavier rather than a light aircraft or a light sport aircraft. It does still appeal to me, so yes. So what do you think of our candidates so far? Let us know. Dan's choice is coming in a second.
FullFlight.tv is for anyone who loves aviation, which is why we have airline pilots and wannabe pilots watching. If you surf the net, you'll know there's plenty of advice from people who've never actually flown. So, with so many pilots here and such a huge amount of experience, we decided to ask for a few flying top tips.
The top tip for me is during the seasonal changes between summer and autumn, and obviously winter and springtime. And pay particular attention to the dew point and the ambient temperature. Whenever these are close together, you're likely to get carb icing and also fog.
Well, the top tip at the moment, with the wind is buffeting around, my top tip, in fact landing today, was to keep a little bit of power in when you're coming over the threshold, because I did get blown up a little bit, and just a little bit more power let me land a little bit more softer.
And we're going to be getting you a lot more top tips on the show from real world pilots very soon. Okay, it's my turn now for an ugly aircraft that I'd still love to fly. This is the EV-97 Eurostar, and unlike its train counterpart, this is actually quite a manoeuvrable aircraft. It's one of the more ugly aircraft that I would like to fly. It cruises at 100 knots, it can go up to 15,000 feet, and it's designed purely for grass airstrips. You can go into the larger airfields, how the big boys might get a little bit upset. Now, as you can see, it's got the big undercarriage, big glass canopy, but I would still want to fly it.
So what did you think? The Eurostar, the Piper, or the Dove? Let us know, and we'll try and arrange a flight in one to really see what it has to offer.
It's a sad fact that a small but significant number of people that their licences lapse almost as soon as they passed. Why? Well, on Monday we'll be getting some tips on how to avoid this from a panel that includes an airfield manager, the lead pilot Yakovlevs, an airline pilot, and the man behind pulleys himself. But here's a sneak peek.
Well, for me it's slightly different. I'm an examiner for the CAA, so I tend to see people coming in, and the PPL is a set routine where you start at A and you go through to Z. So when people are learning to fly, they've got this routine they have to go through, so they are pushed automatically. At the end of it, it's suddenly, wow, what do I do now? And I think clubs around the world do